Hello, this is Dr. Eric Bricker, and thank you for watching A Healthcare Z. Today's topic is FDA pharmaceutical industry ties. Now, this video today about the FDA comes from a New York Times article from September 2nd of 2021 by Farhad Manju, and this is an opinion piece. But I especially like opinion pieces in the New York Times because so much of journalism today is opinions anyway, that when they come out and say it's an opinion piece, then a lot of times I appreciate their honesty. So anyway, cynicism aside, now, it tells a story which is fascinating. So apparently in 1992, and I was not aware of this until reading this, the FDA's funding changed, where the FDA started collecting fees from pharmaceutical companies themselves to pay for the salaries of the FDA employees. In other words, it doesn't just come from taxes. The money to fund the FDA comes from the industry that the FDA itself is regulating. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that potentially grounds for a conflict of interest? Okay, so, and they're actually, listen, I don't want to call it quid pro quo, but let's just call it this. There were quote-unquote performance guarantees given by the FDA in exchange for this sort of funding deal. And they were around the speed of review. So we talked about regulatory capture in previous A Healthcare Z videos. I'll leave a link in the show notes to what regulatory capture is. But essentially, here we have a division within the executive branch of the government that's being funded by the industry that it is supposed to regulate. This might cause problems. Let's investigate further. Okay, apparently, according to this opinion piece in the New York Times, a third of drugs that were approved by the FDA between 2000 and 2010 had subsequent safety problems. A third. Now this gets to the different stages of approval, right? There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And after stage 3, pharmaceutical companies are allowed to then sell it on the open market. Physicians can write prescriptions for it. Okay, but then there's stage 4. I'll leave a link in the show notes to that video as well. Stage 4 is post-market surveillance. That's where, and post-market surveillance is highly problematic. And look, post-market surveillance found that a third of the time there was a safety issue with the safety of the medication that was approved by the FDA. Okay, what does the FDA also have that could potentially create a conflict is this revolving door. And this is nothing new. This has been reported on many times before. Many of you are probably already aware of this, where people that work at the FDA then leave to get much more lucrative jobs working within the pharmaceutical industry. This particular opinion piece talks about 13, greater than 13 cancer reviewers that left the FDA to then subsequently work in the pharmaceutical industry. And it has an even more egregious example in that the regulator, specifically within the FDA, responsible for regulating Oxycontin of the opioid epidemic and their Sackler family and Purdue Pharma notoriety. This guy's name was Curtis Wright. Curtis Wright was specifically groomed as a relationship within the FDA by Purdue Pharmaceutical. And after he left the FDA, guess what he did? He went to go work for Purdue Pharma. So we not only have Pharma paying for the FDA's budget and their salaries, we also have people that know that if they're industry friendly, that they can then leave the FDA and get a job in industry paying them a ton of money afterwards. Now, what do we do? What do we do this? So we need to act today. As a physician, I need to decide, what am I going to do today about something that's FDA approved and new? And I was actually taught something in my residency at Johns Hopkins that I found to be very helpful. So one of my attending physicians in the outpatient clinic, called Dr. V, okay? She said, look, it might be a good idea to wait 5 years after a medication has been newly approved to start writing prescriptions for it for your patients, unless there's really no better option. And I was like, wow, that way you allow more time during the post-market surveillance phase 4 period to see, okay, well, what did they not catch in phase 1, 2, and 3 that actually might be problematic? All sorts of random stuff. And this was just during the beginning of my career as a physician, where Vioxx was sort of akin to like an NSAID pain medication, was found to have increased cardiovascular and stroke risk. Likewise, Avandia was a diabetes medication that was found to also increase poor cardiovascular outcomes. In fact, Dr. Nissen, the head of cardiology at the Cleveland Clinic, was the one who came out against Avandia, and the pharmaceutical industry tried to ruin his career. But guess what happened? Avandia was taken down. Next, Zelnorm was an IBD medication. There was all these Zelnorm commercials. That Zelnorm was taken off as well because it had problems with liver function. So all these things, Vioxx, Avandia, Zelnorm, there were other medications there were other options. And so instead of going straight to using one of these medications, like, we just used something that was like another option. So certainly there's going to be situations where there's no other option, where something is new, and you're like, whoa, maybe we should use this new drug right away, because frankly, we don't have any other options. And I would put in that category the COVID vaccine. So in this day and age, listen, I'm vaccinated against COVID. My family's vaccinated against COVID. I could go on to people in my family of both conservative and liberal mentalities who also are all vaccinated. So the point is that when it comes to COVID, there's really no better options, in my opinion. And it's not about, in my opinion, it's not about FDA approval. It's also about the approval of this vaccine by the regulatory agencies of so many other countries across the world that we might say, hey, look, our own FDA is suspect. But do we think that literally every other drug approval agency in the entire world is also so suspect that they're going to endanger the lives of the vast majority of their citizenry when we have a worldwide pandemic at stake? And so listen, nobody's got a crystal ball. Nobody can see the future. It's a cost-benefit decision that everybody needs to make. So in terms of COVID, listen, I'm just speaking for myself. For myself, in my own personal opinion, it made sense to get vaccinated. But that does not change the fact that the FDA has a major problem with getting paid by the pharmaceutical industry that it's supposed to regulate. And if you want to talk about poor decisions in democracy, I would put that up there and say, look, that probably needs to change. And that's my point for today. Thank you for watching A Healthcare Z.